Hello and welcome to Indy Talks, the monthly interview show brought to you by the Hudson Independent, which is the most trustworthy source of news in the river towns. Our guest today is Whelan, who is Vice President of the Westchester Land Trust. Cara, welcome to Indy Talks.
Thanks, it's a pleasure to be here.
I think it would be important, first off, just to describe what it is Westchester Land Trust does. A little bit of sort of a quick history of the organization.
Sure.
And the scope.
So we're a land conservation organization. We're focused on land protection and stewardship. We were founded 31 years ago, 1988. Our headquarters is in Bedford Hills. We have 4 acres there. That's called Sugar Hill Farm, and we have a staff of 10, so that's where all of our work is based out of. And we protect land, so it's not a complicated mission. We protect land forever. And we have a team of staff who are proactive in the land protection side of things, and then we have a team of staff that takes care of the land that we've already protected, our stewardship team. We've protected 8,400 acres, and primarily we do that 2 ways. One is through holding conservation easements, and we have staff who monitor those easements every day. And we have several thousand acres protected through easements, and then we actually own land ourselves, and those are our nature sanctuaries and preserves. Many of them are open to the public.
Right. Explain, if you will, how an easement works. I mean, I know it's a complicated legal matter, but to the extent that we can tell viewers.
It means that the land stays in private ownership. So Westchester Land Trust doesn't own the land that we hold easements on. It's a legal document. It's written specifically for a parcel, and we work in partnership with the landowner to ensure that their goals for the property are protected in perpetuity. So we look at a parcel of land and we say, what are the values of this land if it's a meadow system or a wetland? And the easement will describe certain things that this landowner can and cannot do on that property. And we basically protect that land forever by having staff go out to that property at least once annually and monitor the easement. And they take photographs, they walk the perimeter, and they look for any violations or anything that will harm those conservation values. And I think the unique factor of a conservation easement is it stays with the land. So we have 4th and 5th generation landowners on easemented property that we then, cultivate a relationship with and sometimes walk the property with and learn about what they're doing on the land. But it's our job to basically care for that land forever. So our mission is a very long time.
Right. So if I'm a landowner and I have a piece of property that qualifies for an easement, what do I get out of it? Other than feeling good about protecting the land.
Well, I was going to say, number one is the satisfaction of knowing the land will be protected forever. And we laugh about that, but the more I'm on these easement kind of monitoring trips and excursions, landowners do love their land, and they love to know that it will be protected forever. So that is, first and foremost, that's pretty much why people come to us to protect their land. But there are some tax incentives. There's a state tax credit, and then the value of that easement is a deduction that they can take at the time of placing the easement. So we do evaluation of the land.
Right.
And what basically they're giving up. They're giving up their development rights, and that has a value to it.
Yeah. It sounds like this is something, though, that applies mostly to wealthy people who would be in a position to gain a benefit from a tax deduction.
In many cases, yes. I will say we just actually did a purchase of the development rights on, last year we completed a deal with many different conservation groups on Stewart's Fruit Farm, though. So there's a situation where, it's the oldest working farm in the county.
Where is Stewart?
It's in Somers, New York, and it's about 200 acres, so it's quite a large parcel of land. It's been farmed for many generations by the Stewart's family, and we were able to come together and work with state ag and markets to actually purchase the development rights. And so Westchester Land Trust now holds that easement. The farmers were paid for that value because it was a high priority parcel to protect for our organization. And it's open to the public for apple picking, and the public really does get a benefit as well because they get to access that land and know that farms are going to stay in this area, and that one was getting threatened by development.
Right.
So
how small can a piece of property be in order to qualify for an easement? Obviously, the large tracts.
Large tracts are great just because the natural resource integrity is typically stronger. And we did do a 200-acre easement up in eastern Putnam, and that's one thing I should say, was we do work in Putnam County as well, the eastern half of Putnam, and that's based on watersheds and all of Westchester County. So that's where we do our conservation work. But we do a lot of connectivity and looking at how to protect land in between the already protected parcels. And so some of our land projects would surprise you at how small they are, just because they're either adjacent to an existing preserve or easement, or they're providing a really critical link and corridor. So connectivity is a real buzzword. You'll hear it a lot if you talk to land conservationists, but it really helps to inform our work. So one of the things that we have priorities for land protection. We don't just take any land, or we just don't have the resources to just field every call. But we look for certain things. Water quality is a big one. So buffers to tributaries and reservoir systems. Farmland is a high priority for us. We look for woodland systems and habitat, and also scenic vistas. So just properties that you can really get a nice view of.
Right. Most of that land in Westchester, I would think, would be in the northern part of the county. That seems to be.
Some of it is.
You're working in the southern part of the county too, with large populations.
Yeah, we are. We actually have several flagship preserves that are open to the public, but we recently acquired a parcel of land from the Nature Conservancy down on Long Island Sound. It's called Otter Creek Preserve, and it's in Mamaroneck. It's about 30 acres. We acquired it a few years ago from TNC because they wanted a more local organization to take care of that parcel. And we've leveraged several grants to make improvements to the property. And then earlier this year, we announced an acquisition where we purchased a few more acres. I mean, we're talking 1 and 2 acre parcels to expand that preserve. So we are working in really every corner of the county for sure. We did a wonderful conservation easement with the Dominican Sisters of Hope last year.
Where are they located?
Ossining, right on the Hudson River.
Oh, that's the big place up on the hill.
Beautiful. And that easement took several years to really kind of fine tune what the sisters wanted to protect, and where the easement was going to be placed. And now we do have a staffer who goes out and walks that easement at least once annually and cares for that land and looks around and makes sure everything is up to snuff.
Right.
So,
you mentioned the Nature Conservancy, national organization that essentially does what you do.
Yeah, at a much larger scale.
So how do you interact with them, and why should somebody deal with the Westchester Land Trust as opposed to the Nature Conservancy?
I think, it's organizational priorities. I think TNC, the Nature Conservancy, Open Space Institute, there's a lot of very strong organizations that we partner with often. I know Scenic Hudson is, and Riverkeeper. There's also local land trusts. So we're talking about the just scale of the work. And I think that Westchester Land Trust, we're a unique organization in that we're based here. We have a lot of local support. We do have this strong stewardship arm, so easement monitoring. I know that some landowners have preferred to work with us because they know that we will be out there long after they're gone, really taking care of this land and ensuring that their goals and their vision for it are lasting. So it's we play many roles in the conservation arena. And I think that that's one of the strengths of our organization is we'll wear many hats, and our strength is partnering. And that looks very different depending on the land project that we're working on. We can end up owning the land, holding an easement, not holding any of it, and just assisting communities in land conservation. So we're pretty nimble.
Yeah. How much of your work involves having to spend money on property in order to protect it as opposed to other kinds of activities?
We spend a lot of money on land protection. Every deal is costly. In fact, with every project that we do, we actually don't take land or an easement unless we know that we have it endowed to kick off money to actually take care of it in the future, or to monitor it or defend it in the future. So we have a calculator, a stewardship endowment calculator. And there's kind of a base number that we start at in terms of whether we're going to own the land outright, And there's a lot of factors that go into figuring out how much money we need to steward the property in perpetuity.
Right.
And we will privately fundraise for that, or get grant money for that. But it's an expensive business to be in.
So how big a war chest do you have?
Not very big. Not very big. We do a lot of piecemealing projects together. So we sometimes have private funders. Oftentimes we're writing grants. We have a lot of community support and annual donors who really help us keep the lights on and churn projects out. And so, we don't have a huge land protection war chest at all. We're very good at leveraging money and piecemealing projects together to get it done,
Yeah, leveraging money, how do you do this? Sounds like a Wall Street operation here.
Well, sometimes if we have partners, they can certainly put money into a deal. So Stewart's was a great public-private partnership. We had state money. Scenic Hudson supported that financially. We had a local land trust and Somers Land Trust that kicked in money. Westchester Land Trust certainly put in money for legal fees and closing costs and all of that. So it's a lot of cobbling money together. It's very rare for us to have a project that has one funding source. I can't even think of any actually recently.
Really?
And it's a lot of our we raise money to put towards land projects.
Right.
So it's a little bit easier actually to raise money that way when we have an actual parcel of land that people can come out and see. We've heard and learned that people would rather that than just donate to a blind pool for land protection.
Okay. One of the reasons I wanted to get you here on this show is to talk about bees.
Yeah,
It's
everybody's
not quite
doing
that
it.
simple, but talked a little bit about the pollinator pathway project.
Absolutely.
What it intends to do, how it's going, how people can participate in it themselves. Because this sounds like something you don't need to be an investment banker or a hedge fund
Not at all.
landowner up county.
No, it's a beautiful thing because it's very inclusive. Everybody can be on the pollinator pathway. It's a project and it's really a movement now, but it started several years ago as part of more of a landscape project that Westchester Land Trust has co-led for 7 years, called the Hudson to Housatonic. It's a collaboration of about 50 conservation organizations between those two rivers.
Right.
So it's an interstate collaboration, New York and Connecticut. And it set out, we started it with funding from the United States Forest Service to really be proactive in land protection, particularly around land around drinking water supplies and forests. And the funding, that grant ended, and our partners so liked working together that they said, we call it H2H for short, that they wanted to stay committed to this landscape and work collaboratively. So we now have a vision and a mission, and it has its own website and co-coordinators, and Westchester Land Trust serves as a co-host and co-coordinator of it. And this pollinator pathway project was a pilot in between North Salem, New York, and Ridgefield, Connecticut. It was called the Interstate Bee Highway at the time, and it was really targeted to these parcels of land that we had identified as being very high priority parcels in terms of climate resiliency. And it really spun off from there, ended up in Wilton with the Wilton Land Trust, which is a partner in H2H. Norwalk River Watershed took it on, this pollinator pathways, and really started to engage landowners in thinking about pollinators in terms of their backyard, their front yard, in terms of their main streets and their community gardens. And it's all about planting plants that are pollinator friendly, but also thinking about rethinking your lawn and how much lawn you need, and also reducing pesticide use or eliminating pesticide use. And it really snowballed. There's a logo for this pollinator pathway. Many, I know. Cue the logo.
Can hold this.
I know, right? We brought props.
If you join in on the pollinator pathway, you can put one of these on your mailbox or.
Yep, or a street lamp or anywhere, to designate your property. And it does say this property is on the pollinator pathway, native plant, pesticide free. Thousands of landowners are now on the pollinator pathway. More than 50 towns have pollinator pathway programs. And Westchester Land Trust is really, we're helping to onboard communities and towns. And we have a little starter kit. We have, sample proclamations and how to start, documents that help people think about launching a pathway in their town. And it's just a wonderful way to engage landowners. And not every property that's on the pathway will be protected forever. But it's a really powerful movement when you zoom out, and we have a data layer, a GIS layer that shows the pathways and where they're going in between those two rivers, the Hudson and the Housatonic. It's a 1 million acre region.
So I think of it when I first heard about it as kind of an underground railroad for bees.
Exactly. It's really, I know, it's the silliest thing, and I can't believe we spend as much time supporting it and talking about it as we are, because it really started, it's such a beautiful grassroots movement, and it really started very low key, and it's snowballed, and we're now fielding inquiries about modeling this program from groups in northern Vermont and Maine. Really, nationally, people are trying to replicate the program, and it's very replicable. That's why it's doing so well.
So talk a little bit about exactly how it works, what a piece of property does that has the plants and stuff that are going to attract bees. How do you get the bees to go from one place to the other, and what is the ultimate benefit of it?
Well, so from our perspective, and the reason why Westchester Land Trust is so supportive of it is it's about thinking between the already protected corridors. So I talked about corridors and connectivity. There's no better way to do that than to kind of learn about what landowners care about and encourage them to think of their parcels as expansions, and connecting our existing preserves. So for us, it makes a lot of sense to support this, because as these corridors are kind of popping up everywhere, it's really creating this region now that is where pollinators are thriving and can thrive. So it's about pollinator food and habitat. It's not just about meadows. It's about pollinator-friendly trees and shrubs. And we have lists for landowners about what to consider planting in shade and sun. We have little kind of demonstration gardens, so you could do a planter. You could do a plant on a balcony and be on the pathway. You could do a 20-acre meadow and be on the pathway, and that's what's really nice about it is there's many entry points, and we have church groups involved. We have municipalities involved, corporate campuses. There's something for everybody, and it's very easy to do.
So if I have a little 1/8 of an acre garden or plot that I could plant as a lawn, or I can put some shrubs in it.
Yeah.
What would I put in it to be on the pollinator pathway, and what is the benefit of how?
What's happening is, because I'm actually doing it on my property in South Salem, and I've spoken with so many landowners who are just taking simple steps, and every town is doing this differently and launching theirs differently, and some have pledge forms, and some have different signage. They've incorporated this logo, but oftentimes we have native plant centers and native plant nurseries where we're kind of encouraging people to go, but sometimes it's just not mowing. I mean, in part of my property,
grow wild.
I have it, and I'm just amazed at what's been coming up. I mean, we have goldenrod coming up now, and just different species, and I feel like my entire family is just keeping our eyes on what we're seeing, because it's all new and different. And I think what we're also hearing a lot about is this questioning of why the lawn, why are we all cutting our lawn? When did that become the norm, and why did it become the norm? And
what's the answer to that?
No one really knows, but I will say there's so much enjoyment that people are finding on their own property, and I think it's connecting with that. That's what we try to do always as a land conservation group, is connect with landowners, have them realize what an asset the land is and what joy it brings, and then they're more likely to consider protecting their land when they see it that way. And we had a big discussion about this yesterday, is that it's really leading to land protection, which is why we started it in the first place.
Right. Let me play devil's advocate a little bit on.
Sure.
So I'm a small property owner, and I have the opportunity to become part of the pollinator pathway. Seems to me it's kind of a messy look to have all these wild plants growing in my front yard, especially when everybody around me's got these nice, neat, well-mown pathways. What's the argument against that? Just aesthetic. I mean,
aesthetic, and that's the thing. I think eventually, if more and more people get on the pathway, which we're seeing, because the demand for the resources is there. I mean, we are inundated with phone calls, and I've heard it's jumped the Hudson River, so it's now on the other side of the river. Making your no-mow area, what we've done is we've made our no-mow area look intentionally not mowed. So what we do is we border it with a mowed strip. So ours looks, I mean, it's not like it's an unkempt
Okay,
property.
right. Doesn't look like.
It actually looks beautiful and intentional. And I think that for now, as we're kind of converting from a lawn, we are on a very public street where we live. It's very visible. We want our neighbors to know, like, we haven't forgotten this part of our property, but we're intentionally leaving it this way. And I think it's working. Nobody's questioned it.
Right. And so you're getting a lot of bees?
We're getting a lot of bees, a lot of activity, a lot of butterflies, and what we're seeing now is, with the caterpillars and stuff, a lot of birds. And there are a lot of birders in this region. And I think one of the things that we've talked about, there's a pollinator pathway website, pollinator-pathway.org, and you can see on the pollinator-pathway.org, and we can see the towns as they come online. There's different kind of pages for every town on the pathway in this region. And so you can, if you don't see your town when you go onto that website, you can certainly reach out to us and we'll help you launch one where you live. But yeah, it's a pretty fascinating program.
Okay, another pushback is, what if I'm allergic to bee stings? I don't want to be on the pollinator pathway.
Wow, you're coming up with all of them. I've actually haven't been asked that before, but the bees aren't bothering us. We're not bothering them, so we definitely try to keep a distance. I will say, though, that one of the things that we're kind of morphing into is, as we report out to some funders, we had some initial funds to support H2H, the Hudson to Housatonic landowner engagement activities, and as we were looking at metrics about, what do we tell them we did and accomplished, we mostly talked about pollinator pathway in terms of plants in the ground, towns on board, landowners engaged. We never looked at the pollinators. Are they doing, well in this region? And so there's a platform called iNaturalist, and we now have a project within that. It's an app. iNaturalist. And a lot of people use it already, but it's a simple, all you do is you take a picture of what you're seeing. It could be a host plant, it could be a pollinator, it could be a bird. You don't have to know what it is, and that's the beauty of this. Take a picture, it tells the program where that picture was taken, so we can start to see these observations, and we're starting to use pollinator pathways as a citizen science tool to really document what we're seeing, how many we're seeing, and where, what the host plants are, and really trying to measure success that way in terms of the health of the pollinators.
Right. I think of pollinator, I think pretty much bees, but you've mentioned birds, you've mentioned butterflies.
Yeah.
What is the family of pollinators that's out there?
Well, we're talking about all of them when we're talking about this program. So attracting, we're looking at the host plants. We actually had a big all-town program at Grace Farms in New Canaan, where all the towns on the pathway came together, and the state entomologist from Connecticut was there, just talking about leaving down in forests as great habitat for pollinators because of the host plants and the areas where the caterpillars and all of these insects kind of thrive. And so there's a lot of movements to leave trees down or leave leaves where they are, because the leaf blowers are just blowing all of these the eggs and the important kind of stages of pollinators at a time when they need to be there and be left alone. So we're really talking about everything. I mean, everything that you can think of. Moths are great pollinators. Bats are pollinators. It's just moving pollen from one plant to another. So it's all about food source too. I mean, we need pollinators to. They say one out of every 3 bites is thanks to a pollinator species. So we're really talking about them all. But what we are seeing, we often think about butter.
3 bites of food is
due to a pollinator. We often think about butterflies, but we are seeing kind of a lot of people participate in the program because of the bird species too, and what this is doing for them.
Right.
More insects to feed off of,
Are certain species of bees in trouble? It seems to me I've read about depletions of bee populations in different parts of the country. Some of it's attributable to climate change, I gather.
Right.
Others, I'm not sure.
Right, and habitat destruction. So the local bees are, and I'm not a bee expert. In fact, we had a bee expert on staff a few years ago who made me realize I'm really not a bee expert. But yeah, the local bees are really, in jeopardy. I think we do have a lot of people doing backyard beekeeping, the honeybees, certainly our pollinators, but it's really thinking about the native plants and getting back to plants that do better in this region. And creating populations and habitat for the local bees, and there are many that are in jeopardy. So we have a lot of information about all of this on the Pollinator-Pathway website. So lots of resources about kind of the state of the bee population and pollinator population, and also how to get involved.
Speaking of how to get involved, what advice would you have for people who do want to get involved in all of this range of things?
Pathway is pretty self-explanatory. Just hop on the website and contact us. That's an easy one. Westchester Land Trust, one thing I say about us all the time is we're doing great work. We're very busy and successful, but we need a lot of help. We have a lot of land that we care for. We have a lot of even office work, and our headquarters is farmed and open to the community to come help us grow food for our neighbors in need. And we open up our farm several times a week in the summertime to kind of plant, water, harvest food that goes right to the community center for northern Westchester. So we have a lot of volunteer opportunities, and all of them, we have a point of contact, Kristen O'Hara, who kind of manages our volunteers, and she can be contacted through the Westchester Land Trust website.
Right. So you don't necessarily just have to write a check to West.
Not at all.
You can actually go out
Not
and
at all.
do physical work.
We need boots on the ground. We need people who don't mind getting their hands dirty. We have a lot of terrific volunteers, but we're always looking for more.
Okay, so you can Google Westchester Land Trust, or what's the
WestchesterLandTrust.org.
Okay,
yeah.
Simple enough.
Easy to find, and lots of staffers who need. Our stewardship team needs a lot of help on the preserves, trail maintenance, building, native plantings, invasive species removal. We're doing it all, and then we have events that we need help with, and again, the farming work that we do is really important.
Is there an upcoming event that?
Stewart's Fruit Farm. We're doing a big family farm fest, and it's free. It's open to the public, and it's at Stewart's Farm in Somers, and it's really a celebration of the protection of that farm. Food trucks, live music, arts and crafts for the kids. Lots of our community partners are there as well, conservation partners, so learning about your local land trust. And we put this program on with Somers Land Trust, who helped us with that land protection project.
So throughout the month of August, and how long into the future can people participate in that?
That is a one day. So that's September 13th. It's a one day. It's a Saturday, and it's really just a party. So that's one time. But Stewart's is open. People can go there. Apple picking. It's a very popular apple picking site, and it's open to the public every day. And our farm at Sugar Hill Farm that we need help with growing food for the community center is we have farm days posted on our website. We have a big kind of events calendar on our website. People can see all that we have upcoming. It's
Great.
a lot.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, Kara Whelan, thank you very much for coming on the show.
Absolutely.
This has been very informative. And
my pleasure.
I hope that you get some volunteers, both for the pollinator pathway and working on the farms.
Yeah, we need it. Thank you. I appreciate it. Great to be here.